Hi class, my name is Christopher Balderas. Welcome to our Week 5 Share Your Action presentation. The wicked problem I'm going to be discussing is overpopulation. The first thing to talk about when it comes to the wicked problem of overpopulation is really defining why it's a problem to begin with. Overpopulation is at the root of so many of the issues that our planet is facing. As our world's population continues to grow, each new person puts a strain on the Earth's resources, which in effect causes a domino effect of problems that really span many different areas. Those include climate change, shortage of fresh water, ecosystems that are disappearing across the globe, food shortages, the extinction of many different animal and plant species, as well as pollution across the world. These are just a few of the issues that are a result of overpopulation. As more and more people are born, each person puts a strain on the planet, and it has an effect on really the entire Earth, its resources, its environment. We are causing significant harm to the planet, and so this is a problem that is not going away unless we start to get creative in the way that we tackle this issue. In order to put a plan into effect to help with the issue of overpopulation, I had to go through a planning stage. And that included research, brainstorming, going and choosing a couple of different options, and finally also recognizing that I was going to, in fact, run across some obstacles. As part of the research phase of planning, I visited several different websites that focus on the issue of overpopulation. As I visited these websites, I tried to educate myself on the issue itself, but I also wanted to understand beyond the global reach of this issue. I wanted to understand how it affected people on an individual level, and not just how it affected people, but what can individuals do to help with this issue? Because oftentimes when you look at a wicked problem, solutions are really geared towards global solutions. How can a country as a whole solve that problem? How can an entire city solve that problem, or even how can the entire planet? But what's often overlooked is how can we as individuals act to help with that wicked problem? And so that was part of the research. And when I did that, I was able to brainstorm about 10 to 15 different solutions that I could put into effect at an individual level. And one of the obstacles I came across was really accepting the reality that it would be unrealistic to put into place every single idea that I brainstormed. I would overexert myself, and ultimately the results would probably not be great because of the reality that I'm trying to put so many things into place. So instead, I had to choose 3 to 5 ideas where I could put a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on those ideas and really carry them all the way out and follow through with them from start to finish. And so I was able to choose 4 final actions that I could in fact put into place. And so those personal actions are reducing meat consumption, minimizing AC usage, starting a dialogue around recycling, and finally, a little bit of social media awareness. What the first one, the reducing meat intake, really what that looks like, it was essentially avoiding any meat consumption for 7 straight days without any exception. And the reason why that's something that could help, even if one person does it or if everyone were to do it, meat consumption is one of the single biggest contributors to environmental harm. There's so much that goes into feeding and feeding all of the livestock that we end up consuming. And so because so many of the world's population consumes meat, and everything that goes into being able to provide a meat diet, it really does have a significant impact on our planet. The next one was reducing AC usage. As most people are likely aware, that does contribute to global warming. And so if everyone were to just adjust their AC usage even a little bit, it would go a long way towards helping. And so I decided that on a personal level, I would adjust my thermostat usage instead of keeping it low because it's comfortable and it feels nice in the summer. I decided that I'd set the thermostat to 77 degrees for a full 7 days without any exception. No adjusting it even when it got a little bit uncomfortable. The next one was starting a dialogue around recycling. My apartment building, I live in a high-rise tower that currently does not offer recycling as an option, and so I wanted to get a dialogue going with management to see if that was something that they'd be open to exploring. And then finally, social media awareness. I wanted to engage on my personal social media, friends and family that follow me, basically giving them a little bit of information on overpopulation and how it affects everyone, and then putting up a poll asking them how they could potentially contribute and help. So the first one, reducing meat consumption, I was actually able to drastically reduce my diet for a full week. For me, it was a drastic change because I am not vegan, nor am I vegetarian. I do eat meat. And so the way that I did that was I relied on, the fairly popular go-tos, stuff like salads and fruits and dairy products. I am not very knowledgeable when it comes to vegan and vegetarian diets. So I opted to go with some of the more obvious choices. An example of what I had in a day, as you can see, for breakfast, something like a bowl of cereal and a piece of fruit. I'd have a snack, and that typically always consisted of a fruit, in this case strawberries. For lunch, it was something simple like a grilled cheese sandwich. And then for dinner, I would have a salad with no meat, of course. And so it was a pretty simple diet. It was fairly easy to stick to, but I think it was also because it was only 7 days. If I were to change my diet to this every day, I'd probably struggle a little bit. I think the reality here is whether or not someone is comfortable enough and willing to change their diet to all vegan or all vegetarian. And if that's not feasible, and for me it probably might not be, at the very least reducing the amount of meat you consume. So instead of doing that, instead of consuming meat every day, reducing it to maybe 3 times a week or 4 times a week, every little bit counts. And so for me, this was a very drastic change, but something that I felt was pretty successful. And as you can see here, these are photos of some of the foods that I tried throughout the week. Rice with vegetables, vegan cookies, fruits, and cereals. The next item that I tackled was minimizing my AC usage. So I live in Houston, Texas, and it's actually the most air-conditioned city in the world. It gets pretty hot down here, and Houston is one of the energy capitals of the country. And so this is a big deal for us, and I typically avoid heat. I like the cold, so I tend to set my thermostat at around 70, sometimes even lower in the 60s. And so I set it to 77 without any exception. So it did get uncomfortable. It's not what I'm used to. And the way that I did that, or the way that I adjusted to it, is I would simply bring a fan into the room that I was in. And so that definitely made it more bearable. And over the course of the week, it got easier and easier to the point where now I don't see it being unrealistic at all to continue setting it at 77 moving forward. The next item that I put into place was starting a dialogue around recycling with the management of my apartment building. Currently, my high-rise apartment doesn't offer recycling. What we do have is trash pickup, where you literally put your trash out in front of your door in a receptacle. And every evening we have a service where they come and pick up the trash for you. What I'd like to do in an ideal situation is include recycling as a pickup service in addition to the trash service. Maybe not every night the way we have trash, instead maybe once or twice a week. And although it I would accept that it's probably not realistic to include the recycle service in the cost of the trash service. We currently are obligated to pay $21 a month for trash service. It's not optional. I would say make the recycling service an optional one at an extra cost, and hopefully a lot of people will buy into that. So in order to do that, I started a dialogue by contacting my management team for the apartment complex, and I did receive a response from them. And so, as you can see here, there's screenshots of that conversation, and it wasn't the response that I was quite hoping for, but it was still definitely there's light at the end of the tunnel. What they essentially told me was that they would add my suggestion to what they have a suggestion box, and it would be discussed at the monthly community talk, which serves as a forum for all of the apartment tenants, basically the entire community, to just come over and meet in the lobby, in the 9th floor lobby that we have. And there's a monthly talk where they go over updates, construction updates, safety issues, and then they touch on some of the suggestions that have been submitted to them. And so they said that they would add that to the list to the next one, which takes place on July 14th. And I very much plan to attend it. And so the desire and hope there is that when I do bring it up, that there's going to be some positive reception to that idea. So hopefully management and even some of the tenants who attend, hopefully they're open to hearing it, and hopefully a dialogue gets started to where we can sort of push that idea forward and make it a reality. In addition to the dialogue that I started, I figured I may as well start recycling myself. It wasn't a part of my original plan, but I figured that at the very least I could start recycling. So I took my plastics, glass, cardboard, and paper, and loaded it up in my car and brought it over to my mom's, who actually does recycle. She has a recycling service weekly. And so I just used her, and I feel like I can do that for the foreseeable future until I get a little bit more traction on my previous idea with my apartment complex. And as you can see here, those are actual images of the recycling at my mom's. The last one was engaging on social media. This one was quite interesting. As you can see in the screenshot over to the left, I put up a post, a story that on Instagram and it lasts for 24 hours, and I shared a little bit about overpopulation and how it affects everyone and the issues that come as a result of overpopulation. So sharing a little bit of knowledge there. And then I put up a poll asking how folks would opt to reduce their carbon footprint. And I put 4 options, recycling, reduce meat consumption, minimizing AC usage, and then controlling your water usage. And so 103 people viewed the story. I don't have that many followers. I have about maybe 400 or so. And of those 103 that viewed the story, 31 people responded. 21 opted to go with recycling. And I feel that that was the case because people tend to want to do what they're most familiar with, and recycling is a pretty popular way of helping the environment. 6 opted to reduce their meat consumption, which was actually a pleasant surprise. I wasn't expecting to see that. Only 1 opted to minimize their AC usage, which wasn't surprising because we live in Houston, and I don't see that a lot of people are going to want to do away with that comfort. And then the last one, 3 opted to control their water usage, which I think was a not an entirely surprising result there. So really, I think what this emphasizes is that there's still a lot of education that's needed. I think a lot of people tend to go with what they know, which is recycling, and are probably not as knowledgeable in some of the other things that people can do at an individual level that will help the environment. So I think education is definitely a next step in what I learned from social media engagement. So the results and impact of the project, really the effect of it, I feel like each action went well for me. Research shows that things like minimizing your AC usage, reducing your meat consumption, recycling, research shows that that has a positive effect on the environment. So I feel like it went pretty well. I was able to stick to the plan and didn't deviate from it, and so I think that went well. As far as the actual impact itself, As you can see here, I use an online carbon footprint calculator. And if I were to continue with these changes over the course of a year, I would reduce my personal carbon footprint by over 4,000 pounds of carbon dioxide, which I think is great. If you extrapolate that over, the nearly 8 billion people on this planet, that would result in huge gains for our environment. So I think what this essentially emphasizes is that every little bit counts, even if it doesn't feel like it on an individual level. And then lastly, the reflection. I feel like this project had a lasting impact on me on a personal level. Each action forced me out of my comfort zone. It's things that I don't typically do. It's a lot of things that were new to me, reducing the meat consumption on such a drastic scale. I've done it in the past, but not quite like this. Starting a dialogue with management, something I've never tried to do, and I felt like it went pretty well. But it forced me out of my comfort zone, and I think that the biggest takeaway for me was that it's the reality that it's going to take everyone being a little bit uncomfortable and losing out on some of those comforts, some of those minor pleasures that we sometimes take for granted, but sometimes it's going to take pushing us away from some of those things so that we can start to affect change, because ultimately the payoff is a lot more valuable than some of those comforts. And so I feel like if everyone did their part and left some of those comforts, even if they're minor, at the door, we'd all play a really significant role in minimizing all of the effects of overpopulation. So that was my biggest takeaway. I felt like I gained quite a bit, and it was a really interesting and I enjoyed the project quite a bit. And then finally, the resources that I used as a result of this project. So I hope to hear everyone's feedback when I post, and thank you everyone.